Hey everyone, welcome. So, we're going to tackle an idea today that, well, it sounds completely backward. The idea that discipline, strict rules, isn't a burden, that it's actually a blessing.
So you hear a phrase like, discipline is a blessing. And it sounds like something carved on a temple, right? Ancient wisdom. But here's a thought. What if it's not just some old moral saying? What if it's pointing to a fundamental law of the universe? Something like gravity.
Yeah, I know. For most of us, the word discipline just screams restriction. It's about being held back, right? But stick with me here, because we're going to flip that idea on its head. What if discipline is actually the most natural, the most stable, and get this, the most freeing way to live? Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we're not going to start with dusty old philosophy books. No. We're going to start with something much more concrete, the basic rules of physics and biology. I mean, just look around at the natural world. Think about it. When a cloud of random water vapor freezes, it doesn't just turn into some ugly, messy ice clump. No, it forms a perfect six-sided snowflake. Or think about the proteins in your own body. These long, chaotic chains don't just stay in a tangled mess. They fold themselves into these incredibly precise, specific shapes that have a job to do. This isn't random. It's almost like this is nature's favorite way to be. And there's actually a scientific name for this. The principle of minimum energy. It's a universal law. Seriously. Everything from a single molecule to an entire galaxy naturally wants to settle into its most stable, most orderly, lowest energy state. It's the path of least resistance. It's the state where there's the least internal struggle, the least friction. Now, here's where things get really interesting. This law of nature, this preference for order, it's not just in science textbooks. You find the exact same idea mirrored in ancient human wisdom. It's like two totally different groups of people discovered the same map to the same place. Let's look at Buddhism and Christianity, for example. I mean, on the surface, they look pretty different, right? One path is all about precepts leading to enlightenment. The other is about the Ten Commandments and a relationship with God. But peel back that first layer and look at the structure. Both of them start with a set of foundational rules, precepts, commandments, whatever you call them, as the first step toward a better, more stable way of being. And this is the key takeaway here. These rules, they were never meant to be a cage. They were meant to be a map, a guide to help you navigate away from the inner chaos of just following every impulse and desire, and move you toward a place of stability and clarity and, well, peace. Okay, so this connection isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. We can literally apply the same physics that builds a snowflake to understand what's going on inside our own minds. You have probably heard of this concept from physics called entropy. All it really means is that everything in the universe has this natural pull towards disorder and chaos. You know, a hot cup of coffee always gets cold, a clean room, if you leave it alone, gets messy. And our lives, if we just let them drift, they can easily slide into chaos, distraction, and conflict. That's just entropy doing its thing. And this simple idea shows us the core battle happening inside of us. A life of just pure indulgence, right? Chasing every whim, every desire, that is a high entropy, high chaos state. It creates a ton of internal friction and just wastes so much of our energy. But discipline is like fighting back. It's negative entropy. It's you consciously creating order, and that leads to a state where you're using the least amount of energy, focusing your power, instead of just letting it spray everywhere. There's this great metaphor for this. Think of a river. Without a riverbed to guide it, a river is just a swamp. It's stagnant, it's powerless, it goes nowhere. The riverbanks, they restrict the water, sure, but that restriction is exactly what gives the water its power. The power to move, to generate electricity, even to carve out the Grand Canyon. Okay, but all of this leads to a huge paradox, right? A big question that I'm sure has been bubbling up in your mind this whole time. Wait a minute, if discipline is all about restriction and rules, how in the world can that lead to freedom? It sounds like the exact opposite. And this is where we have to get really clear about what we mean by freedom. See, there are two kinds. There's freedom the freedom to do anything you want, follow any impulse. And honestly, that often just makes you a slave to your own desires. But then there's a much deeper, more powerful kind, freedom from. Freedom from being controlled by your bad habits, your cravings, your distractions. That is real freedom. The kind that comes from self-mastery. Now, we have to be really careful here. There's a huge difference between wise self-discipline and just rigid dogma. Wise discipline is when you understand why you're doing something, you're flexible, and you're using it to protect yourself. That's totally different from just blindly following rules because you're scared or you want a reward. One of these is a key to freedom, the other is just a different kind of prison. All right, so let's put it all together. Let's trace the logic from start to finish and see why this crazy idea that discipline is a blessing actually makes perfect sense.
Okay, so it goes like this. Step 1. The universe, at its core, loves order and stability, just like a snowflake. Step 2. Our human lives, well, they naturally drift towards chaos. That's entropy. So step 3. Discipline is just the tool we pick up to consciously create order inside ourselves. And that leads to the final step. That stable, orderly state is where we find real freedom. Freedom from all that inner noise and chaos.
So, in the end, you see, discipline isn't a prison. It's a framework. Think about it this way. The laws of physics take a chunk of worthless carbon and, under the right pressure, create a priceless diamond. In the same way, the right structures in our lives, they don't trap us. They're what allow our own potential, our own strength, to finally take its true shape. Which leaves us with one last thing to think about for you personally. What are the structures in your life that you might think are prisons, but are actually the very channels that give you your greatest strength? Something to chew on. Thanks for digging into this with me today.